We're going to continue now with a consideration of human resources in action. There's a whole sequence of activities involved in human resources when you're looking to employ someone. Before we start, we need to consider perhaps a situation. It may be that someone has decided to leave the organisation. Are you looking to replace that person? You see, sometimes that is not necessary. It may mean that you have to consider, is a replacement needed or not? Could it be that the existing employees in that department or area of the business can collectively take over the role that that person was doing previously? They can all do a little bit more work each. If it means that you do need someone to replace the person leaving, does it then mean that the new person coming in would have exactly the same responsibilities as the person who is leaving? Again, that does not necessarily have to be so. If the person leaving did certain tasks and you are going to replace them, the person coming in could do some of the same tasks and some additional tasks or different tasks. And some of the tasks that the person leaving, did have could be passed on to existing employees. So you begin to reorganise and reshuffle different tasks for different people. Okay, so when we are looking to bring in either a new employee to expand the number of people working for us, or to replace someone who is leaving, we need to go through a sequence. The first of those then would be the job specification. We need to identify all of the tasks needed within that job. What is that job going to consist of? What is it going to involve? What are the hours that person should do per day, per week, per month? We need to consider who they report to and who reports to them. So we need to have a clear identification of the specification in relation to that job, and that should be written down. If it was written down for the previous employee, it needs to be looked at again, if it has to be rewritten slightly for the new person coming in. We then need to consider a job description. What type of person with which type of skills and abilities and knowledge and experience will be needed to fill that particular job. So that's two pieces of information we need. One is to do with the task itself, one is to do with the likely candidate or candidates who would be most suited to do that task for us within our business. We then need to design that job, possibly redesign it. It may be that some of the previous tasks are a little bit out of date. Need to be updated, might need we add something onto that. So we do a design to do with the job before we look at what is called recruitment. A lot of people are not totally clear on recruitment. Recruitment is simply looking to make it known that this job vacancy does exist. Make it known. That could be through advertising, for example. It could be by word of mouth. Many companies are going to organise this themselves, particularly if they're small or medium-sized companies. The larger companies are very likely to use recruitment consultants, similar, if you like, to advertising agencies. They will then be given the task, in the first instance, of placing the advertising for you, perhaps, and any early respondents will respond to that organisation rather than to your company. So we go on from recruitment to selection. But before we do, we need to consider, we need to make the opportunity, the job opportunity, known internally amongst existing employees before we consider doing so externally. This is because there might be someone in the company in a different department who has skills that will be ideal for this job vacancy in this part of the business. This gives people the opportunity to transfer within a company, possibly to get promoted simply by moving from one department to another. This is vital for motivation. Employees will be motivated if they believe there are job opportunities for them to progress in an organisation. If they believe that every time there's a good job available, people only from outside will be considered for that, that will therefore obviously be demotivational. Morale will suffer. So you should consider first making this job opportunity known internally before you then make it known externally. Internally, it can be put on the internal, electronic notice board. It could be on, obviously, the physical notice board or whatever, to make it known amongst employees that this job opportunity does exist. Externally, in the modern age, of course, in many instances now, the opportunity is placed online. So it's placed online on a website. And it could be the recruitment consultancy that I've mentioned who placed it. It could be you as a company who placed it. This is highly advantageous if you do that because there are many benefits. One is the fact that the whole process is faster. People are aware of the job today, tomorrow, and can respond quickly. It's much more convenient, particularly for those who are looking for a job. And for you as a company, it is less expensive than other methods. Okay, so you need to consider recruitment, and when people respond to that job opportunity, normally we ask for that in writing. It needs a covering letter together with a curriculum vitae. All potential candidates should, in an ideal world, have an up-to-date CV. If, for example, someone is a student and they're partway through an existing course, that should already be on their CV, that they started this course on a given date in a given college or university, and the title of the module or modules they're involved with. Even if they're only partway through the course now, this is good for a potential employer to see that they are currently studying. So don't wait until the course has ended if you are in that situation. In due course, there will need to be interviewing. Obviously, different companies do use different interviewing techniques. In the first instance, is it going to be the recruitment consultancy that does the interviewing? Or indeed, is it going to be the company itself? In the modern age, many companies or indeed consultancies will deal with first stage interviewing, and then from those who actually respond to the opportunity, who actually write in, 200 people, shall we say, 250 people, then the company may interview 10 or 20 of those, or indeed the recruitment consultancy may interview 10 or 20. After that, there will be a decision made on a shortlist, the 4 or possibly 5 to be interviewed on a second or subsequent occasion. This will almost certainly involve the company itself, if it was a recruitment consultancy first time round, and should ideally involve someone from the Human Resources Department, together with ideally the head of the department where the vacancy exists. So if the vacancy exists, for example, in the marketing department, it should be perhaps a marketing manager, shall we say, and a human resources manager if they're available. This interview at the shortlisting stage will be different to previous interviews. This will involve interviewing in more depth, more probing, and it will be an attempt to sort out between 4 or 5 excellent candidates. These candidates are excellent already. How to decide between them. In the modern age, it will often mean that the person will be asked at some stage during the interview to actually deal with the task. They'll be given a task to do. Might be asked to go into another room and do some form of word processing. Maybe asked to do something to do with a software activity, where they're actually to go on a computer and do something to do with figures on a spreadsheet or something like that, and complete that and print it off and hand in the results. So you can actually see some activity that they are able to provide. Importantly, in the modern age, very often now it's concerned with psychometric testing. This is involved with the indication of activity to do with personality type. So what we're saying here is at the shortlisting stage, a satisfactory CV, first stage interview, highly successful. Second stage interview, you plus 4 or 5 other candidates are going to be met with on this second occasion. you may then be given the opportunity to answer 200 questions in so many minutes, and probably you'll be ticking in reply to questions, yes or no, through a whole sequence of questions, and that will be handed in before the end of the interview. Later on, your psychometric test, together with others, will actually be analysed by experts, and personality types will be identified. The reason for this in the modern age is that very often companies involve their workers in project team working, something I mentioned earlier, and here you plus the other shortlisted candidates are all excellent. What they are then looking for is to see if your personality type will fit in with the personalities of those already working within that team. So the difference may be that your personality may be deemed suitable, much more suitable perhaps than the other shortlisted candidates, and that you will be the ideal person to fit in with those other people already employed by the company, that you will, they believe, become a good team worker based upon your personality type matching and meshing and being suitable in relation to the personality types of those already decided upon, already employed to work in that team. So this is something that companies are considering more and more seriously in the modern age. The large companies certainly, perhaps the medium to small companies will consider that in due course. Okay, we go on then from that, because that is then selection, and we go on from there to consider, as I said earlier, equal opportunities and discrimination. Companies must ensure they're abiding within the law. They're giving everyone that equal opportunity, that equal chance at the outset of applying for the job and being given the opportunity. Whether they're then shortlisted for interview stage or not is another thing. Companies can prove their genuine consideration of all candidates, because what is critical is that when the person provides their CV, that then that is matched against the originally written job description of the organisation. The job description. That can be matched against the CV that the person has actually provided. Okay, we need to consider training now. I said earlier that when people join companies they should go on to some induction training, and that is necessary for them to understand the company, to understand its purpose, that its objectives are clearly understood by all new employees joining the organisation. When people have been with the company for a while, they need then to know how well they're doing, and that tends to involve staff appraisal. The manager of a department will appraise each member of staff 2 or 3 times a year. In the modern age, companies introduce what is called 360-degree appraisal. That means that even managers are appraised as well as other workers. They're appraised by those above them, those at the same level, and those at a lower level within the organisation. Where an employee agrees that he or she has been weak in several tasks, then the company should have a training budget, and the Human Resources Department should be looking to deploy that money to ensure that the individual is then developed further. Where employees are relatively weak, then there should be training courses to help them improve their performance in those weaker areas. So staff development is the next important stage. As human beings in our lives, we need to develop in the job, in the task, and that should in due course hopefully lead to promotional prospects. Employees who develop in a job, do doing that task, possibly job rotation with other people to keep them fresh. They rotate jobs with other people for weeks or months and then revert back. But in due course to be given the opportunity to be promoted, to be given more difficult tasks, more important tasks on behalf of the company, and in return to be better paid, better remunerated. These promotional prospects are vital to the lifeblood of the company, where it invites fresh throughput of enthusiasm and ideas and fresh energy, new people coming through the organisation, moving through, percolating towards the top. That is important, as I said earlier, because if it's only people coming from outside coming into the company at high levels, then those at the lower levels will simply stultify and begin to be disappointed in the job and possibly look to leave to go to work elsewhere. Obviously, in due course, people do leave companies, and another vital role for the Human Resources Department is to ensure that when people are exiting the organisation, that there will be an interview, that they will arrange with each individual due to leave the company, perhaps they have to give 4 weeks notice, for example, before they leave, that within that time span they will be interviewed, and the human resources personnel will begin to identify the reasons why this person has decided to leave. This is vital, because clearly if a company has a high rate of turnover of staff, I suggest above 10% a year, then things may not be very ideal for the employees to work in. It may not be an ideal environment or atmosphere or surroundings. I read in the past few days of a company where the turnover rate is currently above 30% per annum. 30% of employees are leaving per year. A lot of them are leaving through unhappiness. They don't like the working environment. They don't like the management style there. They don't like, presumably, the rates of pay either. So very often, it's a high turnover rate. If there are exit interviews, you can begin to identify problem areas, because you need to address those and improve them for the future. The reason is this. We said earlier on in the course the importance of the human resource aspect of the business. People are brought into the business, time and money is spent on identifying them, selecting them, recruiting them, employing them, paying them for the work they do, training them. That takes time and money as well. If you then lose that employee, they may go to a competitor. And that means you train that person who will then do very well for your competitor, and yet you've spent the time and the money on developing them. If you develop staff, you must have an environment that allows them to be interested in staying within the company, that in return for developing them, they will then want to stay and do good work for you. Okay, so the exit aspect of it is important to identify if, as and when things are going wrong. Clearly some people will leave because they're in ill health, they're leaving the country, they've simply been offered a job elsewhere at a much higher rate of pay. So there are good reasons sometimes why people are leaving, but sometimes there are other reasons where they have been overmanaged, undermanaged, badly managed, or simply there's no motivation within the area of activity within the company, and they feel they must move on for the betterment of their career. Just to say on that, many employees within a company only work there in the situation where they want a job. Many people wish to be employed, to earn money, to live their lives. Management must identify those ideal candidates within those working for them in their area of the company, in their department. Which of those employees reporting to me are the ideal candidates for development and improvement? Which of them do want a career in the company as opposed to simply a job? So there are different mindsets amongst different employees, and managers should look to identify that. In the past, in some companies, people joined for their lifetime. I don't mean their lifetime in the full sense, I mean their working lifetime. It was famous in Japan. Someone would be educated, they'd come out of university, they'd join a company, and they'd work there for 10 or 12 years. They'd work at different stages of that time in different departments of the company. At the end of that time, perhaps they were in their early to mid-30s, they would then be called in by the directors and be given the opportunity to settle in one department for the rest of their working lives. So they would work for that company for their entire working career. That is unlikely in the modern age, I have to say. This is highly unlikely now. Times have changed. There was a famous example in the UK of a man who joined a company at the age of 14. He had a title, he joined with the title of tea boy. He made the tea in the morning. He was the earliest person to arrive. He brought in the milk. He made the tea for all the employees. This was an advertising agency in London. And he worked there from the age of 14 and a half, and he retired at the age of, I think, 72. He worked for that company for over 50 years. When he retired, he was the European vice president of the company. He'd started at the bottom, he'd ended at the top. Again, that is unlikely in the modern age. It's likely in the current environment, the work environment, the business environment, that people will need to change career 3 times on average during their working life. That means they will need to qualify to gain a job, they will need to add additional skills, so they can then qualify to get a different job, probably in a different company. And they may need a third change of career direction during their working lives. So times have changed ginormously. Also in the UK recently, the government here has announced that they expect workers to continue working until the age of 70. People are living longer, they're healthier longer, and it's felt that they may not wish to retire at 60 or 65. They may want to continue longer. It may be important for them financially as well. So again, that's an example of changes in the working environment within the UK. Okay, I'm going to mention a couple of things to do with the CV, the curriculum vitae, this vital element that companies should use to match against the job description that I mentioned earlier on. The CV should be up to date. Companies should match that CV against the job description, and the CV should contain a number of elements. Those elements should be this, and ideally in this order. They should involve the person's personal details, their name and their contact details, address, phone number, email address, that type of thing. You should move on to work experience. That's what the potential employer is interested in, your previous work experience. You should list the most recent, then the previous, then the previous. Then you should move on to education and qualifications. These are vital for the matching process. What companies tend to look for in a simplistic way are called ASKs, A-S-K-S, okay? Your aptitudes, your skills, and your knowledge, A-S-K. Aptitude is to do with your capability, your ability to do something. Skills should be what you have developed in the way of capability, and knowledge is what you know, what you have stored in your memory bank, not necessarily on your memory stick. Companies are often prepared to pay more for an employee who has previous experience, previous knowledge. Therefore, if you have that, you can perhaps negotiate a better pay scale. What is important then are life experiences. In the modern age, you need something in your CV, if you're applying for this job, that makes you stand out from other candidates. What have you done in your life? Have you climbed a mountain? Have you trekked in Peru? Have you done white water canoeing or kayaking? What have you done in your life? Have you worked for a charity in Africa for 6 months to benefit the people working in some villages there? Companies are looking for this now, to understand you as a person, to understand you as a rounded person in society, perhaps a person who is caring in society, not just looking to work to earn money, but you can contribute more to an organisation than just the basics. It helps you stand out, helps you appear to be different from another candidate. After life experiences, there must be references. I suggest 2 references. You need a reference from a previous superior work colleague and you need a reference from someone who's known you for many, many years in your life, but not a relative, who may be biased, of course. Okay, many companies need to know if you are a good team player. Do you play sport? Are you good at football, tennis, cricket? Are you someone who plays in team sports? Very often companies do look for that, surprisingly. Again, are you multi-skilled? These are some of the things that help a company when they're selecting between 200 and 250 employees, those who they will look to interview you. This will get you on to that first stage interview process if your CV is excellent. The rest is up to you in the way of performing on the day and your personality, I guess. So, we're completing now on strategic human resource management. We've looked at the history, we've looked at the consideration of why it is strategic to fit in with the objectives of the company. We've gone on to consider how the working environment has changed over time and how human resources must reflect that. We've looked at how companies go about setting out the recognition of the need for someone for a position in the company, and we looked at how the potential employee goes about securing that particular post within the company. I trust you found this useful. Thank you very much indeed.